right, it is 6:30 and I don't want to keep anybody waiting. So I am going to get going. Got a lot to cover. I'm going to start up my timer so that I can stay on track with everything that I want to get through tonight. And if you do have any questions while I'm going through this presentation, just put your question into the chat and I'll get to it as soon as I can. I am on a porch outside. If you hear a train in the background, the commuter rail goes by my house. So frequently there will be those interruptions. All right. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the cultural councils that supported this presentation tonight. Those cultural councils are, in no particular order, Wilbraham, Holbrook, Pembroke, Westboro, Wrentham, Concord, Norfolk, and Townsend. Thank you so much for valuing creativity and individual artists such as myself. Thank you very, very much. I like to do these presentations kind of low tech because technology does tend to fail every now and then. And I think that most people do appreciate seeing a face rather than hearing a voice talking to them. So I prefer to do my presentations like this. It would be different if we were meeting together in a room together, but in this particular Zoom platform, I think being able to continue to see somebody talking to you, you know that it's live, especially if something happens to go awry. Hopefully, fingers crossed it won't. Tonight, I'm going to be talking, first of all, a little bit about me and my background in creativity and the arts. Then we're going to move on to an exercise and talk about pondering as a first step towards making progress in your art form. We're going to talk about Art Day, which is a way that you can actually gain 8 hours a week, every single week, in order to do your art. I have an activity to do. There are a couple activities. And then we're going to move on to another one of the important details in getting your work done, which is thinking about presenting. I want you to think about a product that you might like to present, choose a trusted audience for that presentation, and then you need a calendar. You don't need that tonight, just thinking about that. Then we're going to have another activity, which is you're going to actually develop an artist statement. Many of my participants in the past have said they've wanted to do that for a long time and they didn't know how. You're going to get that done tonight. Then there's an exercise that I call folded paper. And truthfully, I don't remember where I saw this activity, but I do remember how powerful it was. I use this activity as a closing activity. I think you'll keep the idea and the emotion from it continuing as you go on the rest of your evening, the rest of your week. And a little story. I'll start with a little story because it is a little bit about myself and why I feel so passionately about helping other creatives to develop and focus on their art making. I was meeting with a friend. She was the mom of one of my daughter's friends in school. A lot of times that's how we make new friends, is through our children and their school activities. She asked me if I'd be interested in being a guinea pig for her. She didn't use the word guinea pig, but She wanted to develop a coaching business. She knew that I wanted to do more of my art, which at the time was writing. And I said, sure, yeah, let's do that. We met every Sunday morning for 90 minutes to 2 hours at a coffee shop nearby. We talked about our progress. She coached me on what to do, how to continue to work. And one week, I had this flash of inspiration. The next week, I came back to her and I said, look what I've done. I have decided I'm going to have a website. I'm going to share my ideas. I'm going to connect with people. And this is what she said, you're beyond help. I was crushed. I thought she'd be proud of me because I had this great idea. But what she didn't understand is that creatives, and you yourself, people attending this workshop, may empathize, sympathize. We have all kinds of ideas. They bombard us constantly. A challenge sometimes is getting things done because of all these ideas. Many times creatives are good at more than one thing. What do you do with that? I have heard people say, no, we focus on just one thing. The Power of One. I think that's the title of a book. Some of you may have read that book. Yeah, that's great for some people. But for artists, makers, creatives, that can feel very frustrating because we have so many ideas. It felt to me like having to give up one of my children so that I could focus and nurture on the one I decided to keep. And nobody wants to do that. That was many, many, many years ago. And since that time, I have come a long way. And I think that my experience is one of those things that will help you to understand and to work toward your own personal goals, whatever those goals might be. All right. And I'm just assuming that everybody can hear me okay. And if anybody can't, just put a note in chat saying, sorry, no, I can't hear you, but I'm assuming the volume's good. Background noise isn't too bad. Yeah, good. All right. Oh, that one's upside down. See what happens when you put things together. I think everything's upside down. Yeah, that's easily fixed. Cool. Okay. So before I get into what is your art form, I'm going to talk a little bit further about some of my backgrounds. I started my creative endeavor as a business owner. My husband and I owned a drapery making workroom for about 20 years while our children were growing up. And this is an example of the kinds of things that we did. This was actually in a magazine, and it was actually on the cover of the magazine, Dream Homes. And then here is some examples of some of the publications that our work made it into. This down here, Spectacular Homes, is actually a nice hardcover book, which I'm pretty proud of. I taught myself how to sew. I taught myself how to sew by watching my mom, but never really getting lessons from her. And also by learning by taking apart other people's work. I worked at a fabric store in Acton, Massachusetts. That was the job I took right out of college. I worked there for 6 years, and eventually from there, from that background, I started remaking some of the mistakes that their drapery workroom had made. And eventually the store started asking me if I'd be interested in taking on some projects of my own. And I said, sure. And then that coincided with the birth of my son. And 2 years later, the birth of my daughter was when my husband decided to go into business with me, which was pretty cool. They say you shouldn't work with your spouse, but in June, we will have been married for 42 years. So I think it worked out. But one of the things when I was sewing, I was always writing. And eventually, because I was writing, I applied for an MFA program in Cambridge, Lesley University. The program was brand new. It was a low residency program. And the beauty of that was it allowed me to continue my business while going to school. One of the things that I knew is that I wanted to teach college. I wanted to teach writing in college, and an MFA is kind of your gateway into that realm. I have been teaching at UMass Lowell and Fitchburg State, teaching college writing, expository writing, research writing, speech communication, technical writing for, I think, 16 years now. My husband continues to install draperies while I continue to teach writing, but also to work with clients, to coach creatives. And I've been doing that, I think, for almost 20 years as well. And I have a couple testimonials. I had the pleasure of working with Bernadette Stockwell as my writing coach and mentor for the past year, and what a year it has been. Through a pandemic, Bernadette has been the shining light that kept me focused when everything else seemed to be pulling away my attention from writing. And that is written by Dr. Alex Wheel, who recently just opened up an aesthetic studio here in Littleton. When I met her, she was an physician, ER doctor. And she wanted to write a book, which she did, called How to Get Your Doctor to Listen. And you can find that on Amazon if you're interested. Other people I have coached, a musician who wanted to be a poet, and she published a book of poetry, also a workbook. And this is Nan Foley. I would recommend to have on anyone's team. She is kind, sensitive, thoughtful, talented, energetic, with a passionate and untiring work ethic. And finally, one of my oldest clients, Eileen Healey, who is a visual artist and what do they call it? A violinist, fiddler in Ireland, Cork, Ireland. And she said Bernadette was always encouraging and supportive. She helped me to gather the necessary tools to rejuvenate my creative spirit. I continue to be a major part of the thriving artistic scene in Cork City, where I live, teach, play music, and have a studio in Backwater Studios. And I teach life drawing, painting at Crawford College of Art. So I share those things with you just to let you know. And I'd love to kind of prove to you that I am qualified to lead this workshop and to inspire you. More than anything, that is my goal, to inspire you. So first of all, what is your art form? And there are so many art forms. And as I mentioned, I tend to swim in many different realms. I'm a fiber artist. I am a visual artist. My little logo back there, which makes me happy. I don't know if it makes anyone else happy, but I'm also a writer. I write novels. I'm working on a nonfiction book about creativity. And you too may find that you do multiple different genres. What is your goal? Do you know what your goal is? Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we fear setting a goal because, as I mentioned, then we have to put aside our other children while we help that one. We all know if you have more than one child, if you have been in that position, or have younger siblings, or coworkers, when somebody has a need, we tend to step up and help them, whatever that need might be. Artists, creatives, makers, when we have more than one goal, sometimes the other goal is put aside. It is a technique, as I mentioned in the beginning, that you can accomplish something, the power of one. So for the next 2-3 months, if you can consider thinking about one goal, then I can help you to achieve that goal. That's pretty much what I'm asking you to commit to. And think about what is getting in your way. I often ask myself that question when I want to do something. So, as a more or less full-time professor, because I teach at multiple colleges, I often know that my students are one of the things getting in my way, but that's my job. And we all have that. Unless you're fortunate enough to be able to devote your 100% of your time to your art, you know that there are always going to be things that are pulling your time. However, there are ways that you can think about that and focus on it and get things done. It does take effort, but one simple way to get around it is to, forgive me, plan out your day. So I say that kind of jokingly, but also seriously, because we're often instructed, just plan it, just write it down, just, every night before you go to bed, have your little 5-step to-do list. Next day you wake up, you check them off, done. Creatives can't always function that way. If we can just carve out 20 minutes a day, 3 times a day, and do that every day, that's going to gain you 7 hours. And maybe on the weekend, you can tack on to that 1 more hour. And that's where I say you can accomplish an entire workday, an entire 8-hour day, by carving out those separate times. 20 minutes isn't that long. It does depend on your art form. Some art forms are messier. My mother's a visual artist. She works in oils, acrylics, watercolors. In order to get started, there's that setup period. However, if you're able to maybe carve out an hour in the evening or an hour before work, or if you have the kind of schedule that you might be able to go home in the middle of the day, or you have a studio where you can work, that's how you're going to be able to accomplish Art Day. All right. So what is your goal? What is getting in your way? To begin, I want to think about the different art forms. When I did this similar workshop last summer, I had 6 different art forms. And what I realized is I hadn't included fiber, which is ridiculous because I love to sew. I have friends who crochet or knit. I have other friends who are weavers, quilters, wearable art, but I'm getting ahead of myself because I like to remember the phrase, live life epically. Last summer, I was saying live epically without the F from life. So I added that in. So what is your art form? What is your art form? For me, it's a matter of thinking in 7 different realms. And I'm pretty sure now that I have included everything that most artists tend to be working in. Literary, that's The L, that's the first. That is not the first. It's like a friend told me recently, we used to think of autism on a scale, and now we think of it as pieces of a pie. And I like to think of art as a similar piece of the pie. Many people will work in more than one art form, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's beautiful, beautiful. So literary would include novelists, short story writers, working in fiction, all the different ways that that can come across. Poetry, all the different kinds of poetry that there are. Screenwriters, playwrights, nonfiction, essays, books. It goes on and on. Basically, we're working in words. The downside of the literary arts is that we can produce a ton of work and nobody sees it. It stays on a hard drive, on a computer. Maybe you print it out. Maybe you keep it in a file in your file cabinet in an office, in a desk drawer, something like that. Thinking about literary arts is one particular area that definitely benefits from my sort of method. And I'll get to that in a moment. Visual art, basically anything that you can see. We often think of painting, but it can also be collage, pastel, pen and ink, digital art, graphic art, all kinds of things like that. Basically, usually wordless. However, there's lots of visual art that includes words. The thing about visual art, depending on your art form, very often it can stack up around your house. My mom, up until about 6 months ago, had paintings stacked before her fireplace in front of her chairs. She didn't sell many of her paintings. She's 95. She doesn't get out that much these days. My husband and I decided we're going to make her house into a gallery. We hung all her paintings on the walls, and now people who come in look around and they literally think they're in a museum or an art gallery. Visual arts are things that are out there for us to see, for us to enjoy, for us to understand in a visual way. Fiber art can be wearable art. Tonight, I'm not wearing anything that I made, although if you happen to see my little video that I put together this morning, I did design that shirt and I also made it. And a couple of weeks ago, my son was married and I made my dress for that. I love to sew, but fiber art can also include wall hangings, macrame, crochet, knitting, weaving. I'm probably forgetting. Very often we can enjoy and display our fiber art in what we wear. It can also be visual because maybe we are making a wall hanging or a bed quilt or a crib quilt, and that is something that we see. Environmental art, I think of that as anything that kind of impacts our environment. So environmental art could be gardening, bonsai, interior design, anything like that that impacts where we are in our surroundings. A soothing, well-designed environment supports everything. I love watching those home renovation shows where they'll take like an old house and make it new again. I've loved that, I think, since I was 12 years old, and I actually had a subscription to House Beautiful. And if you remember from the sewing that I used to do for interior designers, I think that that is reflected there too. Anything that enhances our environment. My brother-in-law is an avid gardener. and his gardens and the walkways at his house, just gorgeous. Performing is things like actors, musicians, street performers, can also be related to literature because we need those written words in order to perform. I know there are minds, and definitely that is performing art as well. Usually it's on a stage, but a stage can take many, many different forms. My friend is a conductor of a symphony orchestra. He's also the executive and artistic director. He's also a performer. He plays clarinet. Performance can involve an entire orchestra. It can involve a single person. The idea is that we are performing for an audience. But remember that, because that's going to come into play later on, an audience. Industrial art. How I define industrial art is it usually has to do with hard crafts. And by that, I mean carpentry, furniture making, glass blowing, metal craft, things that are putting things together. It could include jewelry making. Anything that takes the manipulation of some kind of hard craft. There's a lot of skill involved in that, and usually quite sophisticated tools, although you can look at history and understand that over the course of history, man has come a long way, man, person, people, and those tools have been modified. Industrial art also can include pottery. I'm trying to think if there's anything I'm forgetting. I think you get the idea. And then finally, culinary art. I don't know if you've seen the program on the Magnolia Network, Lost Kitchen, about Erin French, and her progress, her journey to owning and operating the Lost Kitchen up in Freedom, Maine is a remarkable story. Truth be told, I think people who work in the culinary arts, that is one of the most challenging fields to be into because it has an audience, and often that audience is pretty particular about what's going on. Everything from a restaurateur to a caterer to a baker making wedding cakes to artisan bread. So much involved in culinary art, including chemistry, including aesthetics, including the senses. I think in another life that I would love to be a restaurant owner, but in my mind, it exists as just a fantasy. And I bow my head to those people who actually work in culinary arts. So this is what I want you to think about. What type of art form are you working in? And when I think about moving, progressing, achieving goals, I like to think of this kind of pyramid. The bottom level is about motivation. How do we stay motivated? I think a first step is just to ponder. Ponder silently, quietly, reflect, journal, think, meditate. First step, think about what you want to achieve. Then play, have some fun. What's your art form? Do something different. My book that will be out in September has all kinds of instructions for all these levels. But if you think about play, for example, if I'm a novelist and I want to play in the literary arts, it might be writing a haiku. It might be writing a short play or flash fiction, something different. If you're an oil painter, you might want to play with colored pencils or pastels or collage. If you're a performer, a musician, violinist, you might want to play with doing a poetry slam or reading out loud. A gardener who has a beautiful landscape at their house might want to play with bonsai or floral arrangements, something like that. Plan. So planning is about that art day, about figuring out how we can accomplish a little bit of extra time in the week. All right, and then present. This is a first step. In my book, I go into it much more detail, but think about this. If we could spend a week, 10 days on each of these things, and we have a goal up here to perform, bear with me, we should practice. Present to a trusted friend. Whatever your art form, if it's sewing, put together a vest from your outfit that you want to perform later. All right? Present it to a trusted friend. Just say to them, I'm working on this. I want you to be my trusted audience of one. I want you to just bear witness, and I'm going to do it on this day. Set a particular day, make an arrangement, ask your trusted friend, put it on their calendar, go out and have lunch together. Doesn't have to be a big deal, but present whatever it is. Maybe it's reading one poem. Maybe it's showing one floral arrangement and you're working towards something much larger. Maybe it's a sketch for a larger landscape painting that you're working on. You're not asking for criticism, and please make it sure that they understand that that's not what you want. You will only want to share your work. You do not want to critique. Critiques at this point can be devastating, so don't go there. And then we move up here. After you've presented to your trusted audience of one, pause. Take a break, not too long, but reflect, go back, ponder, play, plan again, and thinking about this end goal. Then partner. If you presented to a trusted audience of one, they probably work in a different medium, a different art form. Find somebody who works in your art form and just partner up with them. I have a partner, Jack. He's my writing buddy. And every night, about 10 o'clock, 10:30, he texts me his word count, what he produced in a day. And sometimes he'll say, you gotta dare me tomorrow to write 1,000 words. And so I'll text him back and say, I dare you. And then I do the same with him. I tell him how many words I've written in a day. That kind of partnering keeps us going. So at this point, we're working towards mobilization. We want to get something done. We want to keep going. We've been motivated. Now we're going to mobilize. And then we're going to prepare. We're preparing for the performance at the end. And there's a lot that's going to gel when you think about that. My son getting married a couple weeks ago. A wedding is a performance. If you've ever been involved with planning one or attending one, you know at 3:15 on Saturday, on April 30th, everything has to come together. So the preparation, when you know where you're going to, then we can figure it out. If you ever had a party at your house, You've planned the party 2-3 weeks out. Sometimes it's much further. Sometimes we think about like our annual holiday parties. We might plan those for 2-3 months. A dinner party. Practice your culinary art. You invite some friends over. You say, 2 weeks from Friday night, I'm going to have 2 couples over. I'm going to make dinner. I'm going to try out some new recipes. I'm going to make this new dessert that I saw. All of a sudden, you look around your house and you notice things. You see things from a different point of view. That's part of the preparation. Just like if you're a writer and you're going to submit something to a magazine, when you make that decision, then you take a step back and you read your words again from an editorial point of view, from a reader's point of view. The reader doesn't know you. The editor doesn't know you. Unlike your partner here, who knows your background, that person doesn't. So when you plan that party, you look around your house and you go, I guess maybe I need new towels in the bathroom. Or you notice that streak on the wall from that cup of coffee that you spilled 2 weeks ago that you didn't get a chance to mop up at the time because you were already late for work. That's when you see those things. So that's part of the preparation. And then we have manifestation. Manifestation is when we share with the world. We have manifested. All these thoughts, goals, intangibles become tangible, even if it is something that is intangible, like a spoken word poem, right? It exists. A performance, a play. It exists for the moment, for the audience, and then it evaporates. However, knowing that the audience is going to be in the room, that's when you are thinking about the manifestation of that work. Consider when Lin-Manuel Miranda and his partners were finalizing Hamilton. The manifestation of the thing that is intangible becomes real and solid. And that's when you can polish it. Those things that are more tangible, then you're going to take a step back and imagine from a different perspective how others perceive it. Publish. So my editor has questions with my phrase publish. He doesn't like it because he says, we in publishing protect that word. But I would say, instead of publish, make public. Your novel, your short story is no longer going to only live on your hard drive. You are going to let it out into the world. Your garden that you have worked so hard on, you're going to invite some friends over. You're maybe going to be participating in your town's garden club tour. My brother-in-law, I mentioned earlier, his exquisite gardening, his garden club asked him if he would participate in their garden tour one year. And he said, not this year, I'm not ready, next year, which really helped me to understand how a garden can be performed. Maybe you are going to invite a friend, a musician, to come and play in the garden and just have a small gathering. 4, 6 friends come over. You have performed your garden. Maybe you're going to do a little fashion show of that capsule wardrobe that you have put together. And you're going to show how the pants work with the vest reversible, the shirt, you can roll up. Do a little fashion show. Culinary art. I mentioned the dinner party. practice those skills. A woodworker can put together that end table and invite their friends over and have a look at it and talk about it. The performance doesn't have to be 2 or 3 hours. A performance could be 10 or 15 minutes. I envision a world where creatives are part of a global community like Tupperware parties, where we have little units all over the country, all over the world, where creatives, artists, and makers of all art forms can come together, maybe at rotating round robin people's houses, and talk about their food, talk about their paintings, talk about their wardrobe, talk about their glass blowing. And everybody take turns, and then we can perform all together in a perfect world. That's my goal. That is my goal. All right. So I hope that all makes sense. And if anybody has any questions about it, you can pop it into chat. I haven't seen anything yet. I hope I'm not missing anything. I don't think so. All right. So this is how you can plan. And if you want a copy of this, I'm happy to email it to you. Just send me an email at bstockwell@doyourart.org, and I'll be happy to send it. I have this as a PDF. This is something that I created myself, and I use it when I'm feeling overwhelmed, when I'm feeling frustrated that I'm not devoting enough time. It divides the day into 20-minute segments. Remember, I talked about Art Day, where we have those 20-minute segments. Sometimes your 20 minutes aren't actually working on the product. Sometimes you're brainstorming. Sometimes you might be out gathering supplies and materials. That all takes time. So that's how you're going to divide your day. I often will color code these. For example, things that are really important, I'm going to put in red, and I'm going to decide it starts at 6 a.m. and it goes through until 11 p.m. So I think, what can I do when I first get up? Often the first 20 minutes of the day for me is meditation and drinking my coffee. I call it cats and caffeine, but I do try to meditate, to stay quiet while I'm sipping on my coffee, while I'm petting my cat. Often the day includes work because we have jobs very often and we have to devote time to that. I always sketch out time for my lunch, dinner, snacks even. But first, I like to divide and figure out what are those 20 minutes that I can devote to my art, and make sure that I set those aside. It's often been said, if you want to save money, you have to put money aside first. You can't make a savings account by taking what's left over at the end of the week, because usually you have found a way to spend it all. The day is like that as well. A lot of times I'll get to the end of the day and I'll realize things didn't go as planned. That's all right too. Tomorrow's another day. We can only act right now. So right now, I'm talking to you. I hope that I'm inspiring you just a little bit. I often have 10 things up here, but usually I only have 2 or 3 items that I write down. Many people have said that if your to-do list is too long, it's ineffective. I would agree with that. And then if there's particular goals, there's a place for 5 goals. And then this is a really handy thing, just calls that you need to make. So often that little 5-minute phone call, 2-minute phone call is the thing that's taking up our cognitive load, because we haven't done it yet and it keeps nagging at you. So if you write it down here, then you can cross it off. It's pretty cool. I do this on my iPad, and I have many layers. so that this is one grid, and then, you know, Monday I'll add another layer and I'll go through and just check it off. But it's a pretty handy tool. And as I mentioned, I'm happy to send it to you if you want a copy of it. So we have talked about pondering, we've talked about presenting, and we've talked about performing. And those 3 Ps are kind of the foundation, the structure of my idea of doing your art and getting your art done. So here is going to be our first little activity. And it's just, I think, a fun activity because there's no right or wrong. It's just, you know, thinking about doing it. All right. So pick one of these things. And I asked you to bring a piece of paper to our workshop. You can do it on your laptop. You can do a Word document. You're not going to be sharing this. It's more just thinking about how you have accomplished this. And I'm going to give you about, we are running a little short of time, so I'm going to say 5 minutes. Pick one of these things. Your ideal day. What would be involved in your ideal day? Your dream house. What would that look like? Where would it be? How many rooms? The best hour. Think about your life so far. What has been the best hour for you? Just 60 minutes. The best minute. Sometimes, especially in writing, there's something called exploding the moment. If you think about any sort of explosion, it starts like this, and then in a microsecond, things are everywhere. How long is it going to take you to describe that? So think about the best minute. Or your favorite scent. Maybe it's a perfume, maybe it's a cologne, maybe it's a flower, maybe it's a baby's head, the sweet smell. Your favorite sound. What is your favorite sound? This is one of those James Lipton questions from inside the actor's studio. What brings you peace? What makes you calm, relaxed? What is your desert island book? And I was looking at that. I didn't write dessert by mistake. No, I didn't. What is your desert island book? You're stranded on a desert island. What is the one book that you would want with you that you could read over and over and over again? What was your favorite toy as a child? Sometimes looking back at that thing brings back so many memories. And then describe your favorite meal. So in these exercises, I tried to get at different senses. All right, I'm going to give you 5 minutes. My timer is now 42 minutes in. So 5 minutes, write it out, and then we will come back. And I'm going to turn my camera off just for those 5 minutes. And I will, don't go anywhere because there's more coming up. All right. So I hope that was fun for you. Writers often go down these rabbit holes, sometimes started and prompted by little writing exercises like that. But depending on any art form, the idea of writing, free writing, especially about some of these topics, which tend to be so rich in the detail, the memories can be just fun and a way to get yourself going. Okay. I just will put up just to block the next one. The next thing that I wanted to share with you is something that was part of my dissertation. 3 years ago, I earned my PhD from the College of Education at the University of Massachusetts in Lowell, where I also teach. And the process of getting a doctorate is exhaustive. And one of the things that I researched as part of my dissertation was the connection of emotions to creative writing. Since that time, I've discovered that emotions are interconnected with any of the art forms. So if you think back to that live life epically and all of the different art forms, there's a way that you can actually measure your emotions. I call it self-medicating through the arts. I think that it's healthier and safer than many other ways that we self-medicate. And I think that it can be just as beneficial. So this is an emotion diary, and this is something that you can, I'm not sure if it's on my website, but in a moment I will show you a calculator that's on my website that is a way that you can actually quantify your emotions. Give it a try. Trust me on this. So when I did my dissertation, I only had these Likert scale ways to rate your emotions. But since then, I've developed it into a 10-point ranking. I'm looking at the various emotions that we have on any given day: happiness, frustration, sadness, pride, anger, irritation, embarrassment, enthusiasm, anxiety, disgust, and wonder. What I suggest is that you note how you're feeling before you do a creative session. So maybe it's sewing, maybe it's a project, and you have 2-3 hours in the evening, you're going to work on this. But when we begin, we often take with us the day. Maybe it's writing. Maybe you're going to work on that novel tomorrow morning, which is my hope. And I'm going to record how I feel before I start. Then I set my timer. I usually put in about 90 minutes. For me, that's the perfect amount of time to be creative. And then I measure. I go through and I fill this out again afterwards. The miraculous thing is that whenever I do this, I always notice an uptick in my emotions. And I'll show you in a moment. So this is how it would look. And this here is an example of my emotion diary when I was working on my dissertation, and I was working on writing a novel. I wanted to understand myself as well as the participants who were in my study. And you can see it's kind of crazy. So it goes up and then down and up and way down. and then up, and then, you know, if you were in a doctor's office and you saw something like that, I guess you'd know you were alive. And then this scale is something called an interquartile range, which if you understand statistics, you might understand what this is. I barely understand statistics, but I did manage to put this together from the people who are in my study. And what was interesting is it's a personal best. Everybody's different. We shouldn't try to compete with other people. We should only take note of our own progress. I think that that's healthiest. So Emery, her emotions didn't vary very much, and she was always in the upper range, 12 to 16 and a half, which I'm down here. I barely got up to that point. I was like -2 up to maybe 12. And I compared most closely to Ruth, who was also a non-traditional student. She was a 30-year-old student back in college. So I just show this to you so that you can see that the ranges can be pretty extreme. And before we get to the artist statement, which is the next activity, I wanted to show you something. Hopefully it's still up. Yes, it is. That's the beauty of Zoom. This is an emotion diary. You can go to my website, doyourart.org, and one of the first tabs, if you click on it, you'll see on the drop down, it says emotion diary. This is an Excel. This is something that I have programmed so that it gives you an exact reading. So remember I said, now I measure my emotions on a 10-point scale, and this will actually calculate. So on any given day, how happy am I? I'm going to say 7, and then frustrated. Well, not usually too frustrated. Sad, I tend to be not sad at all. Pride, that's kind of hard sometimes. I'm going to say a 4. Anger and irritation, I'm usually pretty level-headed. Embarrassment, though, sometimes I'm going to say a 6. Enthusiasm, well, tonight I'll say a 9. Anxiety, this is things that can go wrong. Disgust, I try not to be too disgusted with myself. And then wonder, I'm always amazed at just how beautiful the world is. So it gives me a score of 69. And then what I would do is I would do my writing 90 minutes and then go back and fill this out again. And without a doubt, it always goes up, even if I have no idea what I'm going to be writing about. So I share that with you, and I would prompt you to try to get that measurement yourself. So Douglas asked a question. So I hope that that little exercise and showing you that Excel, that it will calculate it for you. And if anybody knows anybody that does makes apps, I would love to figure out how to make this into an app so that we could very easily, like on our phone, just tick in our numbers and keep a running account of our emotions. I think that would be so much fun and so cool. Okay, so moving on, the next thing that we're going to do is an artist statement. And an artist statement is a not too long series of sentences that describe what you make and why you make it. That's it. That's what it does. What you make and why you make it. It's a stand-in for you, the artist, talking to someone about your work in a way that adds to their experience of viewing that work or hearing that work or seeing that work. Okay, so imagine your artist statement is tacked on a wall in a museum, in a gallery, next to your chair that you made, next to that vase that you blew up with glass, next to the painting that you did, next to the poem that you did. An artist statement can also appear in a program. If you're a performing artist, maybe that artist statement would be included in the program. So that's basically what it is. crystal clear. And that came from the creativeindependent.com. That's where I went for that. So in order to do your artist statement, and this is going to be our next little activity, I want you to answer the following questions. What, why, and how? To do this successfully, you need to think about that one thing, okay? Maybe it's the one thing you're going to perform in the end. Maybe it's the cake that you have been working on this recipe and you're going to have a pop-up dinner at your friend's house. She asked you to come over and do this, and you're going to have this artist statement with the dessert. So whatever it is that you hope to perform, think about what it is, why you made it, and how you made it. All right. Again, I'm going to give you 5 minutes. I'll turn the camera off so that you can work in peace. Afterwards, if you have written it on your laptop and you're able to easily pop it into the chat, it would be so much fun to be able to see what all of you have done for this. Okay. So 5 minutes. Let me get my timer going again. I'm right there and go. And I'm going to put the questions into chat so that I can turn off my camera. What? Why? About one more minute. All right, how'd it go? I hope it was successful. If anybody would like to drop your artist statement into chat, that would be great. But if you're not quite there with it yet, that's also okay. I just think sometimes it's fun to be able to see. Last summer, when I was also doing these workshops, some of the one person who has a line of cosmetics made with bear fat, which I thought was, well, I thought it was unusual. And since then, she has educated me a little bit more about it. And I can see, and she had always wanted to have this artist statement, and she came away with it. Wonderful. Laura put one in. I'm a visual and fiber artist who creates beautiful objects which echo nature's beauty. Love it. My intent is to evoke feelings of tranquility and wonder in the viewer. Oh, I'd love to see some of your work, Laura. I hope you can connect. If, at the end of this, I would love to try to build a small community. I mentioned that my dream goal is to have these little pods all over the world where we come together and share whatever our art form might be. All right, great. And if anybody else wants to pop that in, and if you have like a Instagram that you want us to follow you on, or if anybody wants to stay connected, put your email out there. That would be lovely. Oh, Douglas put in a very nice one. The what that would encompass most of my artistic wishes would be a poetry and music performance in an art gallery that was showing my paintings and drawings. Beautiful. I'm going to go for sure. Why? Because it would be a way of integrating my disparate creations for an audience. Ideally, the show would have a theme that would cut across all the media. Love that. Love that idea. I would love to see it with other artists and, like the connecting theme of, I don't know, butterflies or, I'm trying to think of other themes. The 20s, anything like that. Not our 20s. I'm thinking the 1920s. And how there's a lot of creative work involved, but also a lot of logistical work. Yeah, I know most of the pieces, but I have not yet put them all together. Thank you for sharing that, Douglas. That's wonderful. Probably 3 summers ago, I was attending an online workshop, and it was led by, can I remember his name? It's a funny name, Carrie something. Not going to come to me. But what he talked about in writing, because a lot of what I tend to focus on is writing, because that's one of my art forms, was these 3 ways of looking at the people who guide us, the people who we look up to, the people who can serve as our guides along our journey to creativity, to art, to whatever that is for you, whoever you might be. Those three types are the sage, the Sherpa, and the struggler. So the sage is not at the top, but I think sometimes they think they are. I think the guy's name was Carrie Oberbrunner. I'm not sure, but that sounds right. The sage is the expert. The sage is the person who is out there touting their expertise, their knowledge, sharing with the world from that pinnacle point of, I know this and I'm going to tell you, and my way is the right way, and you should do everything my way. The sage has some advantages. They often are schooled and trained. They often have expertise. That is the thing that makes them the expert or the sage. Then we have the Sherpa. And if you know anything about climbing Mount Everest, which I certainly would never want to do, but I've read lots of books about it because I have this kind of fascination with it. One of my favorites was Into Thin Air by John Krakauer. And the Sherpas are the ones who do the heavy lifting. The Sherpas, think of them as somebody who has figured out shortcuts. They know the lay of the land. They know how to get from here to there safely and to live. And we want the Sherpa. We need the Sherpa. The Sherpa is going to help us and be our assistant. Very often, the sage couldn't do it without the Sherpa. I'm thinking, like in publishing, a graphic designer who has figured out some of the shortcuts. Yeah, I could figure it out on my own, but why not, as they say, hire your weaknesses? The Sherpa in maybe acting or performing for a musician is the person who is also a little bit ahead of you. You know, they're a little bit further along the journey, but they're willing to help you. Sometimes the sage is not so willing. They like their position of power. But a Sherpa, also somebody that you're probably paying to assist you, they figured out the shortcuts. And then the struggler is the person who is like you, who is struggling to get to the goal. I used to consider myself a struggler, but now I prefer striver instead. I like that idea. I am one of you. I am not at the top. I'm not sure I ever want to be at the top. Yeah, I have figured out some shortcuts, but I still consider myself part of the tribe, part of the large group of creators, artists, and makers who is trying to get there, who is striving. Struggle has more of a negative. Striver is like, yes, I am making those strives forward. And I'm going to share with you what I know so that you too can join me in this. So that's kind of like when you're looking for help, when you're looking for guidance, remember these and think about which one do you think is going to be most beneficial to you. Very often, just finding a partner who is also striving can keep you motivated, just like my friend Jack. As a matter of fact, during our meeting, he texted me, 684, we'll write more when I get home tonight. All right. So the last thing that we're going to do together is, doesn't have a little thingy. What happened to it? Well, I have it right here. is what I call the folded paper technique. Okay, so for this, it is most helpful if you actually have a piece of paper. And I forgot to get a blank piece of paper, so this is a scrap that I printed out all of my slides, but I only needed one, so I guess this is making good use of it. So what I'd like you to do on this piece of paper, first of all, is fold it in half, and it is really best if you actually have paper. You can do it mentally. That works too. But it has a lot more power if you got it tangible. So fold your paper in half, fold it in half again, so that you end up with just a piece of paper that has 4 quadrants. And then I'd like you to quickly think about 4 goals, 4 things you want to accomplish. Maybe it's going to be this summer. That seems like a good, doable amount of time, all right? It does not have to be specific, but something so that when you see the word, words, phrase on this piece of paper, that you're going to be remembering what it is. So for me, I'm going to say, I'm going to have a garden this summer. Another thing, I've got to finish my revision on my book. And then, I don't know, I'm going to let you figure it out. So I'll be quiet and let you ponder this. So take a piece of paper, fold it in half, then half again, and write your 4 goals. All right, so we'll rejoin in just a minute. All right, and as I mentioned, it doesn't have to be too specific. And if you haven't finished this, I would say, for the sake of the exercise, write down something. All right, next, this is what mine looks like. Garden, finish my revision, make a cookbook, and host a reading. Okay, so this is where having the paper is helpful. And I'm going to ask you to tear it into those 4 quadrants so that they are on separate sheets. So noisy, huh? So now we have our 4 separate goals on 4 separate sheets. But now it's much easier to order them, ranking in terms of what's least important to what's most important. You could do it the other way around. So for me, I'm saying gardening, I don't have a green thumb. I'm looking at my lawn right now. I'm not going to garden. It's a pipe dream, maybe 1 year. And then the next one is make a cookbook. I'd like to do that. Host a reading, and then finish my revision. That's like a number 1 goal for me. So of those 4, we're going to take this first one that is not going to happen, but also that you're willing to let go. All right? There, it's gone. I don't have to think about it anymore. Now, I can focus on these 3 things. Cool. 3 is easier to do than 1. creatives often get overwhelmed. We are subject to shiny object syndrome. If you've ever walked into a Michael's or Joann's or AC Moore or out west, Meyer, hope I said that right. You know, those things, and we see all the crafting supplies and we look at it and we say, oh, that'd be fun to try. Okay, so now we have just 3 things to focus on. All right, so now you're gonna look at the next thing, make a cookbook. Well, yes, I wanna do that. Whoops. We must be running out of time. My signs are starting to fall down. Oh no. All right, so I'm willing to let this go. Okay, so now we have 2 things. Okay, 2 is way easier to do than 1. All right, so I know that I need to do my revision or my book's not going to get finished. So I'm going to say, all right, I'm willing to give up for the moment on the reading. Now I have just 1 thing to focus on, the power of 1. Now, every moment of every day, those 20 minutes, 3 times a day, that art day, I know I'm going to put art day toward my revision. So now you are left with that 1 thing. Now, I want you to crumple that up and throw that away. How do you feel? How do you feel? You didn't expect that, right? You didn't expect me to say, take your number 1 goal and throw it away. But very often, that's just what we're doing. However, where'd it go? Ah, there it is. That was silly. But you crumpled it up. You can take it. You can flatten it out. You can still do it. All right? So take that crumpled piece of paper, tack it to your mirror, put it in your wallet, put it on your windshield, not in the way, on the dashboard. Put it inside your planner. Put it someplace that you'll see it. Snap a picture of it. Make it the screensaver on your phone. Make it the thing that pops up every time you pick up that device. Let this crumpled piece of paper be the reminder and be the motivation to keep going, to do your art, even if your art falls on the floor. All right. So we are almost out of time, but what I'd like you to take away from this is things we talked about tonight. Ponder. Take the time to reflect and to think about what you want to accomplish, your goals. Find your group. A group can be just 1 other person. A group can be anywhere in the community, in the country, in the world. It can be a small group, 2, 3 people. It can be a large group. Find your group and be part of it. Be active. Find a coach. Find that 1 person. Life coaches, creativity coaches, book coaches, accountability coaches. Put that into Google and you'll come up with all kinds of responses. The fees that they charge can vary from $75 an hour to $1,500 an hour. Beware of the people who are going to do it for free. When I started my little discussion tonight, I told you about that person and how damaging that can be. Find someone who is trained. Stay in touch. I have a Facebook group, Do Your Art. on Facebook. Join the group. I haven't been that active in the group lately, but I'm hoping that will change. All right. doyourart.org. Go there, sign up. And I'm giving away a free mug tonight. Isn't it beautiful? And every time you take a sip, you're going to read those words. I am doing my art. Okay. So I'm giving away a free mug. I'm going to choose randomly from the people who attended tonight. And to get a copy of the free workbook that I mentioned in my promotional materials, all you have to do is go to doyourart.org and sign my mailing list. And hopefully you'll immediately get a download for the PDF. You can print it out, pop it into a notebook, and follow along. All right. And we do art because it makes us happy. So remember the emotion diary. Track your emotions. See how you feel. Thank you, Laura, for that message. Thank you all for joining me tonight. Stay in touch. Trying to think if there was anything else. Oh, yes, of course. My cultural councils that gave me grants and supported this. Again, thank you to Wilbraham, Holbrook, Pembroke, Westboro, Wrentham, Concord, Norfolk, and Townsend, the cultural councils. All are local agencies that are funded by the Massachusetts Cultural Council, a state agency. So I appreciate what they do for us artists. And thank you so much for attending. And yeah, do your art. All right, thanks so much. I have recorded this. I will be uploading it to YouTube. And I'm pretty sure I collected your emails when you signed up. So I will be sending you a link if you want to watch it again. Thanks. Have a good night. Thank you, Douglas. Thank you, Lisa, for attending. Have a good night, everyone. Anyone have any questions? Wonderful. Good night.